Coming up today on Locked On Texas Tech, variety is the spice of life, and the KU offense has 6 ways from Sunday to skin a cat. We continue to combine cliches to discuss how to stop it. Next on Locked On Texas Tech.
You are Locked On Texas Tech, your daily podcast on the Texas Tech Red Raiders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
We're going to start this thing off right. Raider! Everything runs through Lubbock.
Great to be with you again on Locked On Texas Tech on the Locked On Podcast Network. And thanks as always to those making us their first listen on YouTube or anywhere you get podcasts. Today's episode brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use our code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. With the only Chris Level, I'm Casey Cowan, and we are looking Lawrence way as we're getting ready for the Jayhawks. Some things to dive into today regarding the Kansas offensive attack. We'll get to a speed trap being set up by their QB and who in red and black could be anticipated to keep up with that guy. And, of course, we'll hear from Joey McGuire on the variety of ways that Kansas has found as an offense to skin an opponent. And we'll revisit a couple of subjects from a week ago. You had some swaps really on both sides of the line of scrimmage, in the trenches and on the back end of that Tech defense. And we'll take a look at how they performed through one game. But let's kick it off with some focus on the Jayhawk offensive side of the ball, Chris, and some perspective on that from Red Raider head coach Joey McGuire.
There's as multiple as anybody in the country. There's never going to be a time to where they're just going to line up. They're going to shift. They're going to motion. They're going to shift into a wildcat formation with their 2 running backs, 4 and 20. They'll have 12 in the backfield. They're going to run some option. They're going to run the outside zone. They're going to take shots off the option. They just, they find ways to create explosive plays. You look at their quarterback. He was at North Texas, and, I remember him in high school, when he's battled to where he's been a starter, and then he's, got beaten out, and then he's been a starter, and, they lose their quarterback, and they, Bean has really stepped up. He's a great athlete. He's extremely fast. There's probably 2 people on our team that can run with him. One is Miles Thompson, and the other one is Tyler Owens. After that, he's the fastest guy, one of the fastest guys in the conference. And so it says a lot about their coaching staff.
Sounds like a handful, Chris, and maybe a gray hair kind of week for an opposing defensive coordinator.
As I was thinking about the week ahead for all the teams, I mean, for the 2 teams that we spend the most time of, you're facing the Lions in basketball, the Jayhawks, and then the Spartans on Sunday with San Jose State coming into town. And yet this Bean is the biggest problem, I think. And the Jayhawk actually is the least scariest of all the mascots that you're going to be dealing with. Kansas's offense is it's kind of interesting because I don't know that they have real guys like running it. Okay. And what I mean by that is like Devin Neal could play for anybody really in the country. I think Daniel Highshaw could play for a lot of teams in the country. I think Jason Bean, while he's not Jalen Daniels, he's really turned himself into, I think, I think he's doing his part. He's not being asked to necessarily win games. He's not losing them, though, but he's really turned himself into a pretty good pocket passer. And he is one of the fastest guys you'll ever see. I mean, I will say this, he was last year. This year, he came out of the game last week, got dinged up in a knee issue, and I thought, he came right back in, but he was, not quite the explosive athlete. But I'll also tell you that they don't have anything behind him right now, so I don't know if they're going to run him as much. Cole Ballard is a walk-on true freshman quarterback whose dad is the general manager for the Indianapolis Colts. But that's all that's behind Jason Bean right now. And Ballard came in for a play, but I just don't think they're going to put, Bean in too much harm's way unless it's like a, short yardage or goal line or whatever. So you may not see a lot of that speed, like in theory. But
I like
he
that
is
theory, by the
yeah,
way.
I know. Yeah,
As a
that's
Tech
right.
fan.
That's right. I mean,
That does sound like something that could, I don't know if it limits them entirely, but we're talking about this variety of ways they can attack you. Maybe that's one that's a little lessened or impacted. I don't know.
yeah, maybe. I think, but the problem is, and what I mean by this, they don't necessarily call runs for him. I think, I think they still will when you get inside the red zone around the goal line, or when you're in red zone, and and he can kind of run it and then just go out of bounds without like having
Gotcha.
to take a shot. I think those are still in play, and I'm sure that if you flush him out of the pocket, he'll still, take what is given. But yeah, I mean, it maybe not quite as explosive. I think that's a net positive for Texas Tech, but maybe he's perfectly healthy and he's just fine now. And maybe everything that I've said is off, but based on the shot he took to the knee, but I still just don't think they want to chance it with him, because they're one game out of a spot in Arlington. Yeah. And they have nothing behind him but a true freshman. And we've seen what that show looks like for Texas Tech. And it's not a knock on true freshmen per se. It's just that's a lot to ask a quarterback on a big stage. But their offense is it's a lot of eye candy, man. Bells and whistles times 10, and they ideally, what their goal is for you to go, gosh, we can't follow all this stuff. Let's just simplify and play a base defense so nobody gets screwed up. And that's exactly what they want you to do, because then now they've got you. Now they know where everybody's going to be, and they know how to attack whatever you're going to line up in base. And I think Tim DeRuyter's goal this week will be, okay, you're trying to stress us out. We're going to have a stress contest because I'm going to do things to try to stress you out. I'm going to try to line up in different things, show you different looks, cloud the picture for the quarterback, and all those things, and see if you can't. Because Jason Bean, I'll say this: he started every game since Jalen Daniels went out versus BYU in late September, and so he's really been the starter here for 5 or 6 weeks. He doesn't throw a ton of touchdown passes. You look at his numbers, and it's like 10 touchdown passes, 4 interceptions. 5 of those came against a loss versus Oklahoma State. And so he's not, necessarily going to drop back and just hammer you with thread the needle and all that. They live off of screwing you up and then busting an explosive play. Option, double reverses, like we're going to outshift you, and then we're going to leak the fullback out, and like they did last year with Jared Casey on a 4th and 1, and then in 66 yards later, the chunky fullback's running down the field for a touchdown. I mean, that's what they live off of. They really manufacture offense, but they do have some really good players. I mean, Devin Neal ran for nearly 200 yards against you last year. So I'm just telling you, it's gonna be a problem.
Well, I was curious to ask you, all these variety of ways, great, but there still has to be a bread and butter. And I was a little curious what maybe I thought it was, because you have seen some wild variations statistically. There's a 410-yard passing day. There's a 225-yard rushing day. Then there's a 90-yard rushing day. They just came off 74 against the Cyclones. Is there a bread and butter, or what comes to mind if you really think, all right, crunch time, what do they like best? What are they leaning on? First, today's episode brought to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook and the official sportsbook of Locked On. And fall is in the air. Helmets are on heads. Briskets are on smokers. And the action is with America's #1 sportsbook. And there's never been a better time to join in on that action than right now, because new FanDuel customers can bet only $5 and get $200 back in bonus bets guaranteed. So dive in and join in on the fun with FanDuel by downloading their safe, secure, and easy-to-use app, where you can bet on all things under the sports sun. And when you're a winner, you're always paid instantly with FanDuel. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon and sign up today to bet $5 and get $200 back in bonus bets guaranteed with FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. What comes to mind if you really think, all right, crunch time, what do they like best? What are they leaning on?
Well, I think they're going to lean on the run game. I think that's what Oklahoma State basically said. Mike Gundy went into that game, and Kansas lost this one. But Mike Gundy's basically deal was, and I think Brent Venables kind of did the same thing. They basically were like, we will do everything we can to stop and limit this running game. We're going to make Jason Bean beat us. And I think that in both of those games, he made mistakes, and now in the Oklahoma game, he was able to live to tell about it. But, against Oklahoma State, he throws for 5 touchdown passes, but he threw a crucial interception at the end. My point of saying all that is their bread and butter is absolutely a running game, in my opinion, in a variety of different ways. It's getting it to Devin Neal and Daniel Highshaw, and whether it's option looks, inside zone, sweeps, whatever it may be, and that's what they want to live off of, and everything that they do there sets up all the other stuff.
I mean, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't know if I've ever seen a 2-game sequence like this for an opposing offense. Against Central Florida, they pass for 91, rush for 399. Move forward to Oklahoma State, they throw for 410, they rush for 90. I mean, it's like night and day, yin and yang, and I don't think that's necessarily the way you would draw it up if you're an offensive coordinator. Let's just be good at everything all the time, but this is the real world. So I guess you got to make some adjustments. You were talking about confusing their quarterback or stressing their quarterback. I would have said coming into the year for Texas Tech's defense, and I'll use this term again, given how many gray hairs those guys supposedly had on that side of the ball, you had a lot of experience, a lot of age. I know some of that has been in flux with guys like Ben Roberts being thrown into the mix so early on. But I would have thought, this is probably a group where a defensive coordinator can ask some things of them. I don't know if I'd use the word exotic or anything like that, or I don't want to say complicated, but how have you seen it from your perspective? Has Coach DeRuyter been able to put maybe a little bit more on these guys' shoulders because of some of the experience they've brought?
Yeah, I think so, because that's his scheme. I think ultimately his scheme is I think it seems to me from the outside looking in very complex, because what is their base defense? Well, they don't really have one, because what he'll tell you is, and what's even written in the game notes is, we're multiple, which means, you can be a 4-man front, a 3-man front, and all those things. And there's so many guys that are hybrid types that I think it's just kind of a lot. There's a lot of gray area going on. And that the point of that is that they want to change up what they're doing a lot within a game and be good at a variety of things within a game, because that way the quarterback or the OC or whoever can't get a beat on you. Now, in theory, some of this works better times than others, and I just think. But you're trying to. He tries to put a lot of athletes and range on the field at once, and then you do ask a lot of them, and and I think that the change. We'll get into this in a little bit, but the swap with Baskerville and Tyler Owens is a prime example of that. Trying to figure out, where to get your speed and where to get your length and all those things to where it would better benefit you. But stopping the run game this weekend will be, and a lot of it is on the perimeter, so it's out in space. A lot of it, they create Kansas will create a conflict player to where it's like somebody like Tyler Owens, for example, is going to be out here going, okay, I have a decision to make. Here they come right at me. One's got the ball, one's over here. What do I do? And so, his speed will need to come into play on the perimeter, certainly. But the running game for Kansas is going to be a problem, I think, to try to deal with. Because if you can hold them to, 87 yards like TCU ran for, you will win.
I think I'd be betting with you. Yeah, I like that bet all day and day. If you're holding them to a number like that, feeling good about your chances. The theory thing, in theory, we're going to be smart. We're going to be multiple. And then you begin to think about that Mike Tyson getting punched in the mouth deal. We've all got a plan until you get rocked. And then you've got to adjust. And I guess this offense is kind of unique unto itself for the season. I don't know if you're going to see something of a very similar variety before the year is done. It kind of reminds me, even back in my small little corner of the football world growing up, when the vaunted Dimmitt Bobcats would come to town, most likely looking for their first win. And then the DC tells you, boys, throw it all out because it's a circus offense this week. We're going to learn something specific for about 7 days, and then we've got to move back to regular football offense, I guess. But is there anything else similar to what you'll see Saturday, the remainder of the season, or is this kind of one of those unique unto themselves weeks?
It's really one of the more unique ones you'll see in the Big 12 and in the country. I think just the way that, and I'll be interested to see Andy Kotelnicki is he's been with Lance Leipold since Wisconsin Whitewater since I think 13. So we're going on about 10 years now where they've worked together. I think he's in line for some opportunities. So is Lance Leipold for that matter. If they so choose to, cash in off of their performance here. And especially considering I don't want to bury the lead here because Jalen Daniels was the preseason Big 12 Player of the Year.
We're just like, all right, c'est la vie.
and he hasn't played since he got knocked out of that. I don't know if he got knocked out or he just didn't even start it, but that BYU game back in late September, and it's been a back issue ever since. There's lots of theories there about Jalen Daniels, but bottom line is Kansas is just kind of said, hey man, let's roll, and they've just won and won and won and won. They're undefeated at home, but it's a very unique scheme, and you'll see it when you watch it because it's like, I mean, there's just dudes moving all over. They don't just, as Joey said a second ago, they don't just like break the huddle and then go line up. That's just the beginning, and it takes a lot of discipline. It takes a lot of discipline and coordination to get everybody, because they're trying. A lot of times they're just going to run the same stuff out of a variety of formations, but they're switching things up and they're trying to test. Okay, does he know who he's got now? And that's what if you're Tim DeRuyter, you're working on all week. Basically trying to maybe simplify some, but still do what you do. And because they're moving their backs, their tight ends, their receivers all over the place before every play.
You make me think of Jurassic Park. They're probing the fence for weaknesses, and I'll be the Australian or New Zealander that says, they remember. So let's just hope that we're not caught off guard. All right, that should be really interesting to watch for a week, I guess, and then we get back to something maybe a little bit more traditional.
Yeah, pro-style type stuff. Yeah,
but there's
yeah.
Go ahead. We've talked about the word discipline, right? This week already, just in 2 shows. Discipline has been a theme, I think. Do your job type stuff.
I agree. And it is, but I mean, like Central Florida will be more of a spread offense. Texas will be more of a pro style, and who knows who their quarterback will be. And that's obviously a couple of weeks away. But yeah, this one will require a lot of discipline, but it's also, it's one thing when the scheme is good, but also, when they've got real guys running it, that's what also makes it scary. Like when OU was running the wishbone, the scheme was scary, but when and like Nebraska, same way. But then they had like Heisman candidates at quarterback or running back that are running it. You're like, okay, well, that's really a problem.
Even if you play it perfectly, you still got to deal with these guys.
Yes. And we're not to that extent with Kansas, but I mean, I think that there's a similar premise there.
Let's stick with some of this focus, particularly on the defensive side. We've got some room for an offensive mention as well as we wrap it up here with a swap report. First, today's episode brought to you by Gametime, and you shouldn't have to sweat it out when buying tickets to your favorite events, and with Gametime, you won't, because it's always a breeze using the Gametime app, where you're going to find killer last-minute deals, views from every seat, and their lowest price guarantee. Gametime has deals on tickets right up to the start of the event and even an hour after it begins, which means Gametime is the place to find last-minute seats for any event. The fastest, easiest way to buy tickets, and not just fast, but it's also secure and simple to use when you download the Gametime app. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime by downloading the Gametime app, creating an account, and then use our code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. That's Locked On College, LOCKEDONCOLLEGE. Locked On College for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and use our promo code Locked On College for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today for last-minute tickets at the lowest price, guaranteed. We wrap it up here with a swap report. We've had a couple of positions that saw some changes going into the Texas Christian game. One did happen along the offensive line with Dennis Wilburn and Rusty Stats. Would love for you to chime in on that, Chris, if there's anything to chime in about. It seemed like it went okay, given what they were able to do on the ground, I guess. But a little bit more interesting to me because of, the Wilburn thing or the previous experience at center and what Stats had at right guard as well, I guess allowed me to sort of kind of gloss over, how significant that change could be. Maybe I was wrong in doing that. But defensively, I felt a little bit more intrigued by that. I know they're not just wildly different positions, but the Baskerville-Owens swap got my attention a little bit more. And I'm wondering now, after one game in the books, what you thought the tape told on how it actually went.
Yeah, I think I think like especially the week like this, getting Tyler Owens closer to the line of scrimmage and on the perimeter and things like that. I think his speed, because he's one of the guys. If you heard earlier in the show that Joey mentioned, Jason Bean in a race, and we got Tyler Owens, and we got Miles Thompson, and who are on our team. And Miles Thompson, people are like, "Who's that?" Well, he's redshirting. He was came here from Iowa, and he's a track dude. But he hasn't played yet. So Tyler Owens is literally the only guy on your team that Joey feels like could handle the Kansas QB in a race. But getting his speed and athleticism closer to the line of scrimmage, I think, was the goal here. And he had 5 tackles, tackle for a loss, and all those things. But I do wonder if and Tim or Joey would have to be the one to really speak on this. But I do think that Amani Bailey not getting going for the most part, a lot of that has to do with maybe having more run support up there with Tyler Owens too, and like containing when things are being threatened to being popped to the outside and things like that. So, and I thought you played a one high safety look a lot against TCU. I thought Dadrion Taylor Demerson really. Rabbit had the 2 picks. He dropped one. He could have had, he dropped. Well, he actually had 3, but one of them didn't count because of penalty. But then he dropped maybe 1 or 2 others.
I think he could have had a 4-piece on the night.
Yes, McNuggets, man, 4-piece McNugget. Just throw it in there, man, with the quarter pounder, right? Yeah. And of course I want fries. Why are you asking? So I don't know if we've seen enough. I think this week will be a bit of a different test. This quarterback is a bit more experienced. He's more of an athlete. You were going against Josh Hoover, who was a younger guy and all that. But TCU's running game was legit, but so was Kansas's, maybe even more so. So And I think, well, to your point on the other position switch, I think you kind of brought this up to me. He's like, man, maybe that's why Taj Brooks had such a good game.
I mean, statistically, it was great. And then you brought this wisdom up to me that we were going over some numbers off the air, and it kind of resembled feast or famine. You already talked about uncharacteristically a couple of negative gains there for Brooks. We had some smaller gains, and then you had some chunk plays, and that's what totaled your rush total. I know people are thinking, well, duh, what else would total your rush total? All your rushes, genius. But it was sort of a feast or famine. It wasn't just a lot of 5s and 6s all night with no chunks or no negatives. There was like a group of negatives, a group of chunks. So I don't really know what to make of that. But I guess you got through it. You got to win. And I don't know how you feel about it, but back to the Wilburn and Stats thing, I just think some previous experience at those spots and how good Wilburn was there maybe gave you a little advantage, right out of the gates, making that change to be better quicker than what you were going to do defensively. The defensive thing is so interesting, Chris, because you do like what you did against that ground game, 87 yards for them. That's just around a 3 yard per carry average. And maybe you got some additional help with Owens at the line of scrimmage. But 353 through the air for the Horned Frogs was your second worst statistical day of the year. And so I'm kind of, again, the dichotomy of trying to figure out, all right, what did we gain? Or maybe what did we lose? I don't know. And maybe it's just a 1-week type of result. But it's really interesting because statistically, for whatever it's worth, even in a win, you had a rough day as far as pass coverage is concerned.
Yeah, and maybe what you gained was turnovers. I mean, maybe that's what,
True.
And if that's the case, I think you're willing to give up 350 through the air if you can get some takeaways in there, and could have had more. But yeah, it's a very fair point. And speaking of running the ball, a wise man once told me you can't really run the ball if you don't. So you have to stay. Yeah, you have to stay committed to it.
Yes.
The point I'm about to bring up is is there sometimes where it's not going to work? We all know the 4th and 1, run didn't work. Oh, play call, terrible. Well, anytime the play call on a 4th and 1 doesn't work, the play call was terrible. I mean, it's obvious. But yeah, I mean, here was some data for you here on Taj Brooks's night. He went for 31 carries, 146 yards, and then he had the touchdown. 14 of these 31 carries went for 2 yards or less, because what every coach will tell you that is about to play Taj Brooks, and I think what Kenny Perry has said, is that what makes him so good is he doesn't take negative plays. He's always moving forward. He gets north-south. There's not much east-west there. He scores his shoulders, and it's positive. And you can't go broke making profit one after another, okay? But he took some negative plays here, or some no gains. This was the first time we'd really seen this, and there was a bunch of them. So 14 of his carries were 2 yards or less. 9 of those 14 were for 0 or negative yards. Again, this has not happened all year. Yeah. And there was a bunch of these. But I think because you stay committed to it, this is what allows you to pop some of them too. Because the flip side is he had 7 rushes of 9 or more yards. Runs of 14, 16, 19, 20. 8 of those 9 to give you a first down. So I think it was a lot of or a lot of okay, and there wasn't because you look up and it's like 5 yards a carry ish,
right? And
it's really 0-ish or 10-ish. That's how you get your 5 yards carry on this night. And I do think 31 carries is because he only had, I think he had 11 carries of those 20 or those 31 in the second half. Because he gets tired,
sure.
And with everything else you're asking him to do. So, but the question was really about, Rusty and I think Dennis, and Rusty had played right guard for Kitley. I think he had that bionic arm brace on there. I thought he did a decent job. The only matchup that I'm worried about those guys remaining in the season is against Texas. We'll get to that when it gets here, but Texas has 2 superhuman defensive tackles that are just a problem, that basically lived in the Kansas State backfield. But I think you'll be okay versus Kansas and Central Florida. And I think those guys, because Dennis and Rusty are grown men. I think they're both dinged up a little bit and doing the best they can. But kudos to them for opening up some holes for Taj Brooks when they were there, because they weren't always there.
And we're focusing in on these two as a big significant change. And meanwhile, Jacoby Jackson's just over there like, hey, I've only been here for about 48 hours too, as far as a starter or whatever it's been since Cole Spencer's been out. But yeah, you've had quite a bit of change as far as 3 of the 5 are concerned as you hit the home stretch of the season. All right, plenty more to say on this one as we roll through the week, and looking forward to tomorrow's episode, because it will be a game day episode. Hoops is upon us. It is Texas Tech and Texas A&M Commerce coming up tomorrow. So join us for an action-packed electric setup as we get ready for Grant McCaslin's real debut. And man, gave us something to chew on when we got a little taste last time around in Denton. So it's been a long week and a half to wait to see them in person. But looking forward to it. We'll have plenty on that matchup as we get ready for tip-off and continue to look ahead to Red Raiders and Jayhawks. Chris, appreciate the time and insight as always, man. Enjoyed it, and we'll see you tomorrow.
Absolutely. Keep hope alive, everybody. We'll talk to you tomorrow.
And subscribe on YouTube or anywhere you get podcasts. Always there, free and available, so you never miss an episode. For Chris, I'm Casey, and we'll see you right back here for the next round on Locked On Texas Tech.